episode of Inspiring Women Today TV. I am your host, Rodney Miles Tabor. Today is a special episode. They're all special, but you'll see what I mean in a moment. This is the book, Inspiring Women Today, 16 chapters, and a cool introduction, a cool forward by New York Times best-selling author Chris Radish. My guest today is special. In fact, the problem I had to getting ready for today wasn't what to talk about. It was what to leave out, what not to talk about. Let me see. I met Belinda Jane Dolan through mutual friend Lauren Clement. I'm 100% sure. And when she came to the Inspiring Women Project, it was like a tornado of what you hope for when you get it in droves. And you'll see what I mean. The more you get to know her, and I'm still getting to know her over these several years here, the more you'll see what I mean by there's like no thing or aspect of Belinda's life or career that's not inspiring. From her personal life to what she does professionally, to her message and her mission, and or something as simple as her travels, or what I would her personal accomplishments, despite the things she might have been told when she was younger. So I'll leave some of that as a mystery for the book because there's a lot to cover with Belinda. We could take, I have like 10 ideas what to discuss with Belinda right now. And given the format, we keep these to half an hour or so, and we'll scratch the surface. But suffice it to say, these interviews are intended to go deeper and to engage more with the women in the book. They're also intended to spark, to be inspirational, and to spark your interest in not just the being inspired and pursuing your dreams, but to dig deeper with these women. Feel free to reach out and contact these women. I'll put as much as I can in the comments below, so you can and mention their links and pages throughout the interview. So anyway, Belinda Jane Dolan, she's been a juggernaut, an energetic, happy influence, and you'll find out in a few minutes here that's actually her stated professional purpose, to spread happiness. So you'll see what I mean. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce everybody, Belinda Jane Dolan. Hey!
Well, I figured starting to talk about happiness, we'll start with a bit of happy musical to start with as well. So I just want to say a huge thank you for having me here. Thank you so much to Rodney, his beautiful, amazing wife, who is also the superstar Wonder Woman behind all of this as well. And before we make a start, I just want to give a very quick shout out to some of my fellow authors as well. Stella, Christina, Lisa, Claudia, and Betty, Lauren, Diane, Erin, Denise, Christina, Gail. There are so many amazing, inspiring women that I'm honored to be part of this project with. And I am just one of the incredible women in this book as well. So, I want to say thank you to yourself, Rodney, to your wife, and also to the other authors that I have been part of this project with. It's been an amazing journey, and one I can absolutely highly recommend as well. So let's get started. Let's talk all things happiness, yaks, Everest, whatever you've got, throw it at me.
Now that you mention it, I just read a post just before we started, and I'm going to go back to that because you mentioned getting hit by a train and yaks, and inspiration comes in all kinds of places. I want to mention there's a reason Belinda's chapter is last. Every woman in this book has a story worthy of a book of its own, worthy of following, worthy of studying and modeling, but Belinda's just like boom, 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 all directions, and she sustains it. It's not like a dispersal. It's like what we need more of in terms of leadership and what you're doing as well. So anyway, I will try to put my I'm a little starstruck because I dig Belinda, and there's a reason her chapter is last.
Didn't pay. Just letting you know, I didn't pay him in chocolate for all lovely lovely comments, just letting you know. I may have to pay him in oodles of chocolate. And it's the juggernaut thing, and it's the tornado. Like, I've been called so many things in my life and career. Tornado is a new one. Tasmanian devil used to be my nickname.
Ah, oh wow. You know what? That's relevant too. That'll bring us right into now. For most people, the Tasmanian devil is a cliche or a caricature, but in Belinda's case, it's real life. In the book, actually, in her chapter, we talk about Tanzania and the conditions there, and so it's not just a matter of spreading happiness and the idea that you can and should be happy, or that you, as a organization, perform better happy. It's also putting a spotlight on some of these corners of the earth that a lot of us aren't aware of. I did an interview earlier today with Stella from Uganda, and we only met because of Belinda. So, well, let me jump in kind of randomly, because I'm telling you, I got 10 different ways we could go. I figure we'll let it unfold organically, and I've never been disappointed in talking to Belinda in terms of keeping the subject on inspiration, because it's all inspirational. You know what struck me, though, I have to say, as the compiler of the book, as the interviewer, because the way we did this book, I think more or less 99, 100%, is it was primarily based on, our starting point was interviews. So in general, it was an interview, sometimes of only about an hour, and then back and forth over a period of time for edits and changes, and arriving at where we wanted with each chapter. But I remember from, I think it was at a launch party, Belinda, where I had in my mind what I thought was the most inspirational aspect of your multi-inspirational chapter, and that had to do with you had a condition. If I can, without spoiling anything, she was diagnosed early on with a condition in her legs, and this woman before you has done 7 summits, 3 summits.
I'm about to do the 4th
of 7,
and the North and South Pole, and I have a surprise one as well. Top secret, though.
Okay, just for a little context, and then I'll shut up. I live in Florida, so that little hill we go over by the red light out here, that's our most mountainous region. So Florida's flat. So let's start there. Tell me about this. Tell me about these summits. It's not where I was going, but this is great.
and I think, shall we kind of go back a step? I think, often you hear the summit or the end part of the story, but we often don't know how those stories started. For anybody that follows or that's connected, you'll see me stood on a summit somewhere and I have a flag in my hands, or often I actually have a picture of my mom there as well. And you see that and you think, oh, majestical. It's so blissful. It looks so beautiful there. Little do they know that 20 minutes before the photograph, I was on my hands and knees with altitude sickness, which basically your brain starts to swell and it crushes against your skull. It's not a nice feeling. Look, there's better feelings in the world. But that's the thing, isn't it? We see this kind of highlights, this reels of people's lives, but we don't often take a step back and think, how did they get there? They have such a different life than I do. And the amount of times I've heard, I could never do that. So for anybody that's listening to this, I'm going to challenge you. There's no such word as I can't. There's no such word as try. I'm going to challenge you to say you can do anything that you set your mind to. I'm currently I'm about to do summit number 4 of 7. So the 7 highest mountains on each continent, including Mount Everest. I'm also going to the North and South Pole, and I have a crossing. I'm hoping, I say hoping for a reason, because we've got some challenges with weather, that I'm hoping to be the first Australian woman to cross. Now, that may or may not work out. The 7 summits, I may not get, I've got 3 out of the 7 so far. But that's the highlights, isn't it, Rodney? We see that banner where people stand on top. But what we don't actually see is the steps beforehand. I was told I would never walk properly again. I didn't walk in properly until I was 5 years of age. I spent most of my life in calipers, had surgery and physiotherapy. You know, I was someone who was told that I needed to reconsider my options for sports because I wanted to be an athlete and sporty. So I want to step back a little. And for those of you that are listening, if you've ever been told you can't, defy it. Defy the can't and say I can, and just watch me.
That's awesome. And you know, you remind me. That's an excellent point. I love those pictures of. It's actually there's one right here in the book I'll share, and I've seen several of them. And that picture of your mom right there.
And my mom as well. Yeah.
That actually ties back to, I thought the whole mountain climbing aspect was inspiring. And when I brought that up in one of the launch parties, the first place I think you went was your mom, as far as inspiration and what it meant to you. And I got it. You know, I remember from your chapter how profound that was, and I can imagine what a woman she was. And then the other thing, as far it's a great point. You see these images of victory, you know, but maybe it is just as important to read the chapter or dig deeper, because you find out, yeah, she crawled part of the way. I'll share one little bit. It reminds me of when I was younger. I was in a martial arts class, and the instructor was a little disappointed in my resolve or something, so he pushed us, and it was a small class that day, me and another guy named Garth, and we did everything he said. Boom, boom, boom. He was really pushing us to the point where maybe it was the crawling. I remember crawling and working, and I wasn't going to stop. I was going to do everything he threw at us, and I threw up. And in my mind, this was a failure. Like, oh man, what? But he wrapped up class, and we went, and I was embarrassed. And Garth, while we're getting dressed and changing me, he turned to me. He said, "Man, I've never seen anybody work so hard at something that they puked." And it flipped to something I was proud of, and something I learned about myself, that I could push myself that far. One, and also that I could push myself that far, suffer that kind of thing, and not only survive, but feel stronger and more clear about it. So I imagine that reminds you of climbing some of these mountains.
It certainly does. And I think, you know, the Stoics and the philosophers teach us so much in life about we sometimes have to go through the hardships in order to find that joy, to find that purpose, to find that happiness. We can't have an abundance of joy and happiness all of the time, because how would we know that's joy and happiness if we haven't experienced the suffering and challenges? Because, and you know, people talking about what really has driven them is often that struggle that they've been through. Not everybody, you know, I know some incredibly successful people who haven't had, you know, challenges in life, but the vast majority of people, and in each of you watching this now, if you all imagined back over your lives, there will have been some form of struggle, but that struggle does not have to define us. I think that's the biggest thing. You know, I talk about I talk about a lot of the grief that I went through with my mom, and some of the suffering and pain with my leg. Instead of using that in a negative way, because it can consume us, we use it to fuel us. Imagine using that to fuel the fire to greatness, so that you can inspire others. So if there's somebody listening to this today, you know, maybe, you know, you're having your morning coffee, or, you know, you're about to go to bed this evening, you know, have a think about that. What has happened in your life? That's not a failure. Rodney, you talked about being sick, for example, not always recommended to vomit. However, it's not about failure. It's about using those challenges and using them to learn. What did you learn from that? It's the lessons. You didn't talk too much about the pain of vomiting. What you talked about was the success after you were sick. So you can take those learning, experiential learning, and you can actually use it then to go on to that next level. And it will never be as tough as it's been before. You know, once you've summited one mountain, it can never be that tough until you reach the next one, and then you think, well, actually, it's a little bit tougher than the last one.
Yeah, and in terms of appreciating the journey, and you can get to a place where you see all of it as success in a sense, because I don't know that there really is. There's failure if you stop. There's failure if you abandon, unless you're finding another way to do something. In exercise, for example, the way bodybuilders actually, one of the most efficient ways to increase muscle mass and so on is to work out to failure, to where you're actually at the edge, and you pushed your limit to the point where it doesn't work. Well, your body is this miraculous designed thing that compensates for that, and that's what takes you a little further. I keep in all these interviews, I'm reluctant to say it, but there's a Hemingway quote where he says, "We're strongest in the places where we were broken." And that's probably going to precede the volume 2, because I keep quoting it.
And why not? You think of if you think of a broken bowl, for example, with the Japanese will place a beautiful broken bowl together using gold or using platinum or using silver, and the broken bowl is often far more beautiful when it's bound back together with gold or with silver, and often they place jewels in there as well, and it's a beautiful art. And why can that not be the same as humans as well? We don't have to necessarily be broken, but we've gone through experiences that could have broken us, but we chose to be bamboo. And I talk about this a lot: be like bamboo, bend but don't break.
Yeah, and that's a recurring theme with, if not all, most of the chapters in Inspiring Women. Is I think these women are incredibly brave very often in sharing these things. I think they're leaders, because I grew up in an age early on where you kind of it exists on things like social media today, where you show your travels and your happy times, and now, it's like a party, those social atmospheres. You're not there to necessarily bring everybody down, but the opportunity with a book like this is, and with speaking and with getting to know somebody, or following someone like Belinda on social media, for example, is a chance to watch someone who's brave with their own past, because they understand it's not anything embarrassing. It's it's what we've been through. It defines us in ways. Well, let me carry that over then, because you've taken these things personally and applied them to your profession, to you're a happiness expert on a mission to make millions of people happy across the world, and with the conviction that a happy business, happy workplace is more efficient as well. So I've wanted to ask you this for a while, because we delve so much into your personal history, which is worth the price of the book in Inspiring Women. But professionally, how do you do this? How do you go into a company? First of all, a company, if they're reaching out to you, they appreciate happiness, or they recognize there's maybe somewhat of a lack of happiness in their corporate culture. So how does that work when somebody reaches you and you start working with them? Maybe tell us a little bit about that process, and what you do to change their policies and behavior, as we said.
And I have to say that it's possibly one of the best jobs in the world that I have, and for so many different reasons. And it's also very, very challenging as well. But one of the things that we do, so there's 2 parts. So I have 2 businesses. Clariti Group is the happiness one, and then we also have the Quantum Leaps business, which is about peak performance as well. So I get to be in environments with incredibly inspiring people that are wanting to make a better world for themselves and for others as well. And I do sometimes pinch myself. There are occasions when I really do. There's challenges, of course. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, that there are times when, you know, when we get approached to work with organizations, that I do think, you know, how blessed we are. So we started the movement to create the happiest workplaces, the happiest nations, and the happiest people on the planet. And we did that for a reason. We know that there's escalating rates of mental health, mental illness across the globe, in every country, at different levels. And that's been escalating for, you know, for a number of years. And we looked at the fact that, what do we do about it? You know, there's traditional, we've got the medical model, which talks about mental illness and disease being at one end of the spectrum. But what we want to do is almost isolate ourselves from that, and we work in a positive psychology space, and it's the social emotional well-being of people. And the reason why is that we don't want people to come along the spectrum and become sick, to become ill, to have mental illnesses. We want to do our work before people reach that stage. So we talk about prevention. You know, in terms of reactive medicine, there's a reactive medical model. And, you know, my doctoral work, my PhD, is more in the proactive medical model. So we look at how can we work with individuals and groups. And we were wondering, how can we do that? Well, most people spend the majority of time at work or engaged in work activities. So we wanted to create psychologically sound workplaces, or now workspaces or hybrid spaces that people can work from. So we designed the Chief Happiness Officers program. So we want to put a Chief Happiness Officer in every single company around the world, which in itself is a huge task. We've developed a survey that can actually assess the culture, well-being, and happiness of organizations. And we did that for a reason, because we need to benchmark data. If I'm coming into your organization, Rodney, I'm wanting to work with your organization, we need to see where you are right now. And it works on a traffic light system. But the bottom line in all of this is that we're all responsible for our own happiness, our own well-being. But guess what, as leaders, we can create phenomenal work environments that inspire, that motivate, and drive people, you know, into flourishing environments. So why not be part of it?
Yeah, you know, it reminds me, and I think maybe by analogy or by corollary, I helped write a book on a basic book on project management years ago. And one of the big takeaways, and, you know, being a book collaborator is like a whole rich third education, I say. But this, one of the things I recognized in there, actually two different books on project management, and was that there's an inverse relationship. In other words, the more diverse, a diversity, and I am talking about race, I'm talking about culture, gender, all these things. The more diverse a group, the more potential for strength it'll have, because you're taking from, you know, when you're decision making and so on, you're taking from a more varied pool of views and information and experience and culture, and that makes logical sense on its surface, that these things come together for potentially better, stronger solutions. But what comes along with that is it's sometimes a fragmented culture in that way, because you got a melting pot. So you lose a little bit of the customs and norms and things that maybe even on a micro level manners, because different cultures regard each other and have different mores. So the point of that being, diversity is a good thing, not just in a moral or ethical sense, but in a mechanical sense, for your organization and for a civilization. But you have to recognize, to the same degree, you need team building. Team building has to accompany diversity, because it, by the nature of diversity, can be the cohesiveness can be reduced. So I thought that was fascinating, and I thought, wow, that's what a lot of politicians, what a lot of CEOs, it may be what they're missing. They strive for diversity in many ways, but they neglect the team building aspect that's required. So in today's world, you mentioned increasing mental illness across the planet, and I can extrapolate why I think that might be. I'm interested in your thoughts on what's happening and why that is decreasing. But to me, it clearly, by analogy, demonstrates probably a large inherent need for something like a happiness officer in every company across the world, or at least, even if you're a small outfit, to recognize and acknowledge and have that aspect of your company or your business, that there's some aspect paying attention to the happiness factor, because there's all kinds of studies that show you're better off, you're more productive, and all these other things that people strive for. So I'm sure you would agree, because that's what you do, is spread happiness. But you spread it not just in a sort of rainbow unicorn kind of way, but in a very scientific way.
Yeah.
Right? And we talked about policies and behaviors. What might be some of the fixes, for example, that you instill in a group that raises their habit? And how do you measure happiness?
Some great questions, and that's almost a 4-hour interview in itself.
Told you.
But let's unpack some of those comments, and I'll want to go back first of all, if we can, to discuss, you know, the rates of mental. You asked the question around mental ill health or unwellness in people, and there's a number of factors. You know, pre-2019, that was still deteriorating anyway, depending upon which studies you look at. And there's a number of reasons for that, and particularly around youth. I sit on the board of All Kind and Girl Kind, which is one of Australia's leading mental health providers of education for youth, and that's our greatest challenge at the moment in the US and Australia, and equally so in New Zealand and some of the European countries as well, is our rates of mental health are increasing, particularly amongst youth as well. And you asked the question why, and there's a whole multitude of reasons why. The current environment is one of those, but it's only a small percentage of that, because, you know, we need to look more broader. You know, we've got social media as a factor. We've also got awareness as well, Rodney. That's the difference now, that, you know, people used to suffer and they used to have challenges previously, but it wasn't spoken about. If we go back 10, 15 years, nobody ever said, I'm stressed. Stressed wasn't a word, or I'm anxious. You know, those words weren't used. Now we have, you know, billions of dollars around the globe to raise awareness around mental ill health, for example. You know, we can go into factors around food and nutrition. We can also look at, you know, the rates of physical you know, obesity, for example. There's so many factors that impact upon mental health. Mental health and physical health are inextricably linked, and you can't divide the two. So, you know, when we talk about that, that's a huge conversation in itself. But I think it's important to recognize that there is that correlation between mental and physical well-being, and we can't split the two, and nor should we. You know, which is why we work with organizations on corporate well-being. So that's, you know, designing corporate well-being programs to actually identify and measure culture, well-being and happiness through using, there's many tools that you can use. Obviously, I'm going to say our tool is fantastic, because I wouldn't be a good CEO if I didn't. We've been working on ours for almost 2 years now, and the reason why we set that up is because we needed to identify, because CFOs and C-suite need to be aware of the cost, the return on investment for having teams that are non-flourishing, that are unhappy, that are not engaged, that don't feel psychologically safe or sound. So we needed a tool to basically wave in front of people and say, well, actually, this is what's going on right now with your organization. There's 2 ways you can go. We can improve it, or it can decrease. Here's the facts, here's the figures, here's the data, here's your report. What would you like us to do about it? These are the options that we've got. It gives people choice then. They can choose whether they want to create flourishing environments, and some, by the way, choose not to. And that's just the nature of what we do. You know, not everybody really understands about social emotional well-being. So it's a whole other interview in itself, Rodney.
I told you, audience, this is maybe a springboard for a series. But you know, when I was 40, when I left real estate and got into writing, before I decided to go, well, no, actually, I went back to college is the point. So I went back to college and took a couple classes at the age of 40, which is a funny story in itself. Um, but I remember it's different because I had a class, brilliant class, an English class, but it was about electricity, about different forms of communication and so on. Anyway, here I am 40 and all these, 18, 20-year-olds are around me. And the professor one day just kind of went on a tangent and spent the hour, and he roamed the room and he gave sort of a lecture. And I thought it was brilliant. And I went and talked to him afterwards and he apologized. He said, I'm sorry. I was like, no. I mean, I think it was worth the price of the course that one day, because as someone who in the adult world would have been very happy with a weekend seminar like that. But the crux, the theme of his talk was he was talking about the progress of philosophers. And even I think he touched on progress in human psychology, and not just positive psychology, but he said if in our current state of civilization, what we have what academics and intellectuals I'm talking about have boiled life down to was a matter of happiness. That's where philosophy had arrived. And it was interesting because in the ensuing years, as a writer for lots of different projects, that keeps coming up. I know a slew of people who have made career changes and devote their lives to things like joy, happiness, but it's approached more scientifically now. There's studies and there are actions and there are proven things that can be done. So to see you take this to the scale, just the scale that you already have. Didn't you say like something like 27 countries and counting? Did I see that somewhere?
Yeah, most probably if I add up all the regions, and then by the time the PhD is released as well, then that's going to be able to impact policy as well. That's what we're looking to impact at national level and international level. So I don't want to put a figure on it. I want to leave that open to as many millions of people as we can impact. Imagine a world where we were 1% happier, 1% more joy in our life. Imagine that world. Imagine the difference right now. We had 1% less deaths through death by suicide, for example. We had 1% less depression. We had 1% more marriages stayed together. 1% more friendships weren't fractured, for example, or relationships weren't fractured. Imagine if we apply that 1% rule. When we talk about happiness, by the way, we're talking about more broadly that joy and that happiness. And so, I imagine a world where, that 1% happens. There's a beautiful saying, it's Socrates talked about, in every person there is a sun, just let them shine. So imagine that world where people were allowed to be that little bit happier, that 1%. Imagine walking down the street with people that were 1% happy, 1% less afraid, 1% less living in fear. Imagine what that world would be. That's the world I imagined, and that's why we're writing the book and doing all that we're doing and taking part in projects like this, Rodney, so that we can impact, we can work with amazing people like you and the other ladies to make that 1% an actual reality. Before I go, that's what I want to do, is 1% happier.
Before I go. Yeah, that's I want everyone to understand what I believe, and what you just stated is that that's not to be underestimated. I long for a world where just walking around in the streets and the daily activity of living, and you pass people, even on the beach, on places where you would think we would be happy. Very often people are afraid to make eye contact. It was one of the reasons, without getting into a political discussion, why I abhor these masks so much, because they take that away, that human interaction and I think they're to be bad for that. But so what do? Well, what I do is I decided, all right, I don't care if I'm approaching somebody, I'm going to give them a nice warm hello. Hi, how are you? Good to see you. Any stupid little, happiness. And from what I understand from older people, is that kind of warmth used to exist in America anyway. You'd make eye contact and say hello, and now it's like the more of us there are, the more that's in danger somehow. So little movements make a big difference. And when you say 1%, I take that very seriously. 300 million people in the United States. What's that mean? 3 million is 1%, right? So what a difference. There's a fascinating book, really worthy book worth reading, called Microtrends, that I read years and years ago. I think it's Mark Penn, the pollster, who wrote this, the guy that isolated the phrase soccer mom in the Clinton era. So he's a savvy pollster, and he had it's a play on an earlier book from the 70s called Megatrends, where an author named John Nesbitt isolates about a dozen global trends, the satellite, shopping, things like that. Fascinating to watch the evolution of society. But in Microtrends, in addition to there's 20 or 30 chapters of actual micro trends that are going on during the writing of the book, but one of the book postulates that a 3% change in any population is actually a tipping point to make a cultural change. And it's amazing, because so it was kind of one of his yardsticks for what to include in his book. If he could kind of show that this is known or aware, and we have tools like Google Zeitgeist and Google Trends, and to see if something has reached that 3% level, it can actually change the entire. And I took that even more seriously recently when I was given the suggestion that, and I don't know what the exact number is, but take the American Revolutionary War, for example. Well, in my mind, as growing up in the States, I thought, yeah, everybody, was involved somehow. They made bullets, or they farmed, or, for the war. I'm hearing it's between 8 and 30%. Most people think it was 10, 15% of the population that participated in that war. And that was enough. So 1% happiness is a real thing, is serious, and can make real change.
Isn't that all of us? We all have our part to play in this. There's a comment by Marcus Aurelius that he wrote, and I think it's the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. So regardless of what we think is an impediment, regardless of whatever we perceive as a barrier, regardless of what's going on right now in the world, it doesn't necessarily have to be an impediment. That could actually be the way we can still find a way around what's happening. We can still find a way to keep ourselves well. We can still find a way to keep our 1% happier in the family and those people around us. Let's use the example of what you're doing right now. By you and I, we're talking now and I'm being interviewed, but imagine the difference and the impact that could make. That the 1% of people that listen to this, it could impact in some way. They might go and read the book that you suggested. They might pick up the awesome Inspiring Women Today's book, which I can highly recommend. There will be a link below, and please read it, because it will inspire the heck out of you. But imagine if what was happening now and what's happened last week and last year and 5 years ago and 10 years ago in our past, what if that impediment was actually the way? And what if we use that to continue to fuel us to find a way through? I think about some of the trips that I'm going to take, and I'm going to go into the Arctic, into the Antarctic and the Arctic. And, you know, if you look at an iceberg, so let's picture an iceberg. Now, for those that are not familiar, who live in warm climates like Florida, and like I'm from Queensland in Australia. So if you think about the iceberg, when we talk about the tip of the iceberg, think about what's underneath. We don't have to hit the iceberg. We can go around the iceberg. There's always a way around the challenges in order for us to get to where we need to get to. We just have to get creative and not keep hitting the iceberg. So if anybody, you've heard the analogy before, the tip of the iceberg. Well, imagine if for example, the challenges that you're facing now, if that really is just the tip of the iceberg, because underlying it is all the things that have gone on in the past. So what we're going through now is perhaps only part of what we've truly gone through. And there's a beautiful saying, isn't there? You never know what's happening in someone's life, so always be kind. And one of our beautiful clients that we work with at the Bambuda group, they spread the kindness movement. So we do the happiness movement, they do the kindness movement. And I think that's one thing that we can all be, to a certain extent. I think that we can all be that a little bit kinder as well. And what a difference it would make to the world if we were.
Yeah, and I've discovered very happily alternative news and sources of modern thinkers, and been interested in this, and to get a little more information on world events than is typically presented, on the nightly news, which is sometimes, fully occupied by local events and weather and things like that. So, given the there's a lot going on in the world today, between a lot of things to worry about, a lot of things to be alarmed about, and some of the deepest thinkers on the subject I've found, when asked, well, what's the solution? What's the prescription? The two things that come out of it usually, the two answers usually, and it's funny because you're expecting join this group or band to, some big macro level kind of thing. That's not what they say. They say first kindness, and secondly, get involved locally, like in your local school board, your local government. And I think what's hard for a lot of people to realize at first is how uninvolved they are with their local. They couldn't tell you who their local city council was, or who's on the school board, or what's happening with these things, and the kindness we've talked about. Walking down the street, that little thing goes a long way. That little hello you give somebody. I remember in high school, I walked up to a girl, and I wasn't trying to hit on her or date her or anything like that, but she looked terrific that day, and I said, "Wow, you look terrific today." It was 6 words. She melted down. She glowed. The joy that brought her was an epiphany for me. That it takes so little sometimes.
Yeah.
So when you realize something like that, you realize I should do a lot more of it. And you don't know that didn't spread. Just the way honking at somebody or the opposite is true. Those little acts of kindness can go a long way. And you do only see the tip of the iceberg. If somebody's grumpy, you don't know what they've been through that day. You don't know what they're going through, Well, when you read something like Inspiring Women Today, or any biography, memoir, you find out how three-dimensional people really are. And it helps. It helps you. When you understand other people, it helps you get along with them better as well.
Absolutely, it does. And I think that's the whole point of this book, is that it's learning from people. So it's looking at all of our collective experiences together and taking them apart individually and looking at what are the lessons from that. And I just go back to a beautiful comment from someone who messaged me actually only last night and this morning, by the way, that I didn't get a chance to share with you, Rodney. It's actually one of our clients through one of our companies, Quantum Leaps, and he said he was reading Inspiring Women Today to his girlfriend, and they actually broke down and they were crying, but he said it wasn't necessarily a negative thing. He wasn't expressing the fact that the emotion was negative. He said it was actually positive, because sometimes we don't realize the stories and the backstory behind people, because we only see the highlights. And imagine if we were a little bit more vulnerable and opened up a little bit more, so that people could see that their journey is the same as our journey, your journey is the same as mine. We might have taken different pathways to get to our Everest, but the reality is we're all on a similar journey, and it's life's roller coaster. So, you know, that was beautiful feedback from him, because it was a really key point for him, that he didn't realize that a lot of the challenges we are all facing, and some of these incredible women who, you know, really opened up and being vulnerable as well in this book, I think is an inspiration in itself. And, you know, for anybody that is listening, then, you know, I would absolutely get that book open and treat yourself to a page a night. And we talk about habits, don't we, as well? Habits for happiness, finding what creates joy and doing more of it. Pick up the book. It's not a shameless plug for the book, although it is a great book. Open the book and read a page a night. You know, savor. And it's a term that we use in positive psychology, which is savoring. So taking that moment, and as that person did with me, he shared it back. So he took the book, took the inspiration, savored the moment, shared it with his partner, and then shared it back. So, you know, is there some message in that? Could we open that book and read a couple of pages, take the lessons from it, maybe journal them out, and know that our journey is pretty much the same as everybody else's. We've just all got a different pathway to the top of Everest, and it just looks different for different people.
Yeah, that was the intention, the hope that this book would be. And by the way, that testimonial was fantastic. You made my day, actually. And I love that it was from a man.
He's wrote a testimonial. He did it. Oh my gosh, I haven't read it.
Right. But this book is not just for women. It's about these inspiring women, and anybody can find out that they're not alone and see what other people have gone through with it. And the hope was my I thought or assumption was that someone might read it now and find one or two stories that they really identify with, that help them now and get them through something, and then they put the book on the shelf or on their night table, and let's say 3-4 years down the road they move and they rediscover the book that they had, because you move all your books, and they find a different story 3-4 years down the road that, you know, so it's designed to be evergreen. It's designed to show a variety of situations, even in terms of where people are. Now, you're in Stockholm, Sweden?
And it's funny you should mention about the book as well. And I very, very quickly want to share something about the book. And and this is what I'll be doing with the Inspiring Women Today book also as well when Maya arrives, which I cannot wait for. Very excited. You know, we talk about creating gross national happiness amongst nations. There'll be a lot of gross national happiness happening in this household when this book arrives. So I want to share something with you, something very beautiful that we do here in Sweden. So currently I live between Sweden and Australia. And one of the things that they do is they do a nature, like a bibliothèque, which is, the pronunciation may be incorrect, but it's basically a library in nature. And we go to a beautiful national park where I do a lot of my outdoor training there. And you can open the door, there's no lock on it. You can open the door, it's about so big, you know, it's the size of twice the size of your laptop. Open it and there's books in there. So just know that the Inspiring Women Today book is going to be in the national park in Stockholm in Sweden, surrounded by the most beautiful pine. It's a Christmas tree forest. It's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. So the book, when it arrives, and it had to go on pause because I wasn't in Australia. When it arrives here in Sweden, it's going to take pride of place. in just the most beautiful nature libraries that do create joy. There's a seating area next to them as well. That's why I'm here. You know, I'm on the mission around the world to live in the happiest countries in the world. And that's one of the things that Sweden does. You know, they love their books, they love their fika, and also the outdoors is incredibly important. So just know I'll take a picture when it's in the library, the outdoor library as well for you. I'll share that in the group as well.
Yeah, please. Actually, as a bibliophile myself, and obviously someone concerned and interested in inspiration and promoting this book, we have these little free lending libraries started popping up. I thought it was awesome. I'm trying to see if I can find of it. There's actually an organization where you can donate to that cause, and they will put a I can't seem to find a picture right now, but maybe I'll throw one in the comments when I can. These little libraries, little stands that you see out in the public on the causeway over to the beach, or in public places. The Cape Canaveral, where I live, there's a community garden, and which is awesome. And there's a little micro library. It's literally on a 4x4 post with a little thing that people paint, depending on, you know, in our case, it's sea turtles and stuff. You open a little door, and there's two little tiny shelves, like a cabinet, with a bunch of books in there. So I hadn't thought of that. I need to go put some Inspiring Women Today copies and some of those, and let circulate.
There's a movement in Brisbane as well. I'm trying to find the movement name, and I can't seem to find the name of it. But there was a movement in Australia, in Brisbane, which is in Queensland, which is the Sunshine State of Australia, and they have like a book, so you take a book and you hide a book, and then you have to leave clues or you leave pictures, and then people find these books. And I think that movement is around the world, by the way. I don't just believe it's find a book or seek a book or something. I don't believe it's just in Australia. I think it's a global. So imagine if we did that. Imagine if we started we started a 1% trend, because remember, trends start, and whether there's a tipping point of 1% or 3%. So we get those books hidden, and we start to create some ripples as well, because that could impact someone's life in a very positive way. Who knows?
Yeah, and you never know. I've learned that with Inspiring Women. Some of the testimonials that have come back have floored me. The one you just said, and then we have a few other people who have let us know in the little time that it's been out, it made a real difference for them. So that, makes you grateful. It makes you want to keep doing it. It makes you want to get to work on volume 2. Actually. Absolutely. So, well, I want to go ahead.
So I haven't read the most recent one, so I think it'll be good to have a read of those testimonials as well.
Yeah, they keep you going, and you learn from the testimonials. I learned, for example, if you're studying a genre, you don't just study the book. You can study and look at the comments that people make, because it'll tell you what they're getting out of it, what they find valuable as well. So there's a lot in the testimonials, and the testimonials are inspiring. So all very good. I want to, looking at the time, we should wrap up. But unfortunately, as I said at the start, with Belinda, we could go 8 hours and we'd be scratching the surface on any one subject. So if people want to find you, I'm going to share my screen here. I'm imagining maybe the best way is claritigroup.com.
It's a very bright picture of me there, isn't it? Wow. Yes. Please connect with us on claritigroup.com. I would love to connect with you, and don't be a stranger. You see people they're interviewed, aren't they, as well on TV shows, and they're interviewed on podcasts and all of those things. Reach out, take the bold move and reach out. We're always wanting to connect with people. We want to start a happiness movement that operates globally, and this is not just from a business perspective now. This is more broadly. We want to hear from others that are wanting to do the same. There are so many synergies. There's so many people doing great things. We've got books, we've got research being published. We want to share that freely also as well. A lot of the research that we're doing, you know, we really want to be able to share that freely, because the more people that are aware, the more people that are educating on the subject, the more difference we can make. And that 1% then becomes 2%, then becomes 5%, for example. So yes, please do connect on socials. I'm on Facebook under Belinda Jane. You can connect with me through my company's Facebook, through our website, but reach out. Like, I'm daring you. If you're listening now and still listening after an hour, that's a good thing. Awesome. Then I dare you to reach out, and also on LinkedIn as well. I'm pretty approachable. I might not get to your message immediately, but I will always reply, and the team will reply if you go through the Clariti group message as well, and they'll give you my direct details so you can contact me as well. More than happy to catch up with anybody, particularly as it relates to creating a phenomenal life and creating a little bit more happiness as well in your life.
Yes, and I can say I've known Belinda several years. When I go into like preparing for an interview or a meeting or something, and I think about the things she's done and what she's doing in the world today, and and then I realize I know her personally, and she's very approachable, very down to earth, and you might not even know that she is doing the things that she does based on how personable she is. So do reach out, definitely reach out, and I don't want to neglect the other side either. She's a brilliant business consultant, brilliant for your those aspects as well, which I think makes it very unique. It's not like having them. Some people like about when I did mostly book collaborations, I was end to end. I could help you with the writing, the editing, the design, all the way through the publishing, and it made it nice. With Belinda, she has both the business expertise, the acumen, the gut you can trust, and this purpose and intelligence on how to spread happiness. And it does, doesn't it? It starts with 1%. You don't get to 2% without going through 1%. So incredibly worthy goal. Well, good.
I'd ask people to, to take that bold move, not just to reach out to myself, but reach out to Rodney, reach out to the other women that have written this book. And just, there's a special place in the world for people that support others. And so reach out to somebody, if they take a moment to, put a Google review on as well. For that 2 or 3 moments of your life can actually make a long-lasting impression. It doesn't have to be my chapter that you make a comment on. Go on Lauren's chapter, for example, or Stella's chapter. Make a comment on Amazon, or reach out to Rodney as well for the phenomenal work that he's doing and getting the second book, because it's going to be even more incredible women in that. Is that even possible? Most probably. There's enough amazing Wonder Women out there, and we also need an amazing men's project as well. I have lots of men that I'd like to kind of push forward as well for them. They don't talk a lot about what they do, but they're doing incredible things. So
that's a great point. And I think you were one of the first to prod me on that. Like, where's Inspiring Men? Is that in the works? And so I think it's probably inevitable, because people have mentioned it, and I don't have a problem. For the cost of a coffee or two, you can have this on your bookshelf, even if you read a chapter a month or something like that. Because I now know that it's published, what it does for people, and I highly recommend my own book. Of course.
Well, if we can't promote it, and that's the other thing as well. This goes beyond a book. This is a movement of, action inspires action. And there's just, there's a little point that I just want to leave, people on today as well, is, don't seek for everything to happen as you wish it would, but rather wish that everything happens as it actually will. Then your life will flow well. And I think that's one of the points that I know is in the chapter that I've done, and I think completed, but also the chapters and the other ladies as well that have written, is that not everything's going to happen as we expect it and want it to. It will happen. Sometimes things get thrown our way that we don't necessarily want or accept. But imagine a world if we could, everything that happens is happening for a reason right now. but imagine if it brought you into a different trajectory. Like, you know, I came across working with Rodney, for example, which changed my life in a slightly different direction. And each and every moment and each and every one of those moments can create, you know, powerful trends in the future. So yes, please do reach out and connect.
Thank you. Just as you have changed my life, and I know that you'll be changing people's lives through this book and others. So we'll leave it there, only because time is constraining us. But man, that was fantastic. Thank you, Belinda. That was amazing. Thank you for what you're doing, and what you continue to do, and will do in the future. So look her up, check out the book. Thanks everybody for checking out another Inspiring Women TV. Thanks so much, Belinda.